The October wind had a strange bite that year. Not the kind that merely brushes your cheeks and disappears, but the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers that something is about to change forever. That's the kind of cold Violet Thompson felt as she stood beside the polished oak casket of the woman who had once saved her from disappearing into the foster system. Her grandmother, Clara Moore, was gone. Heart failure, they said, peaceful quick, but when someone has been your entire world, there's nothing peaceful about their absence. It feels like the earth opened up and swallowed the only solid ground beneath your feet. The cemetery was nearly silent, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the muted murmurs of friends and neighbours. Violet stood motionless, clutching a single rose in her gloved hand. Her dark coat was flecked with mist. She'd spared no expense for the funeral sleek granite headstone, delicate ivy motif, just as Clara would have wanted. But no amount of beauty could distract from the gaping void that followed her home like a shadow. You see, Clara wasn't just a grandmother. She was the kind of woman who picked up the pieces of Violet's life when no one else would. After a drunk driver stole Violet's parents from her at 6 years old, it was Clara who stepped in, not hesitating for a second. Clara had closed down her antique shop, let go of her dreams, and traded weekend auctions for bedtime stories, math homework, and PTA meetings. That kind of love doesn't just raise a child, it builds them. So when Violet got home that day back to the cramped apartment she shared with her husband, Ryan, she wasn't just returning to an empty space. She was returning to a world that had lost its anchor. Then the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, almost clinical. "Ms. Thompson, this is Leonard Price. I'm your grandmother's attorney. She left a will, and I'd like you to come into my office to discuss it." A will. Violet blinked. Clara had lived simply. Her bungalow was filled with thrifted furniture, chipped teacups, and books with yellowed pages. The idea that she had anything to leave behind other than memories didn't seem possible. But curiosity has a way of slicing through grief, and the next day, Violet found herself sitting in a tidy downtown law office that smelled like leather and stale coffee. Leonard Price, a wiry man in his 60s, greeted her with a kind smile and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "She was very clear about her wishes," he said gently. "She also left you a letter." Her hands trembled as she opened it, recognizing Clara's elegant script. With each word she read, the ache in Violet's chest sharpened. The letter wasn't long, but it was full of the kind of wisdom only time and hardship can write. By the time she reached the end, tears blurred her vision. Price said nothing. He simply handed her a tissue and a framed photo, an old memory from prom night. Violet in her dress, making a goofy face next to Clara in a hospital bed, leg in a cast. She remembered it clearly. Clara had fallen on the steps that very evening. Violet had skipped prom to stay with her in there. "Thank you," Violet whispered, pressing the photo to her chest. "This means everything." She stood, assuming the meeting was over, but Price raised a hand. "There's something else," he said, opening a folder. Clara Moore, the woman who lived on a tight pension and shopped at flea markets, had left her granddaughter to $0.7 million. Violet froze. It didn't make sense. Price explained it slowly. Years ago, Clara had sold rare antiques and invested the money in long-forgotten stocks. She never told anyone. She lived simply, but with a sharp mind and a long view. "She wanted you to be free," he said, "to live without fear." That moment, it was like being hit by a tidal wave. Violet could hardly breathe. The woman who raised her hadn't just given her love, security, and protection. She'd quietly built a safety net Violet didn't even know she needed. She walked out of that office clutching the manila folder, the photo, and the letter. The air outside felt different. She had just gone from barely making rent to being a millionaire. And yet, beneath the awe and gratitude, there was something else. A subtle tension in her chest, a whisper she couldn't quite place. That whisper turned into a scream the moment she got home, but I'll tell you about that later. Right now, I want you to think about this. What would you do if someone you loved, someone you trusted more than anyone, saw your blessings not as gifts but as opportunities to betray you? Before we continue with Violet's story, take a moment and ask yourself, which is harder to overcome, losing someone you love deeply, Be realizing the person you love most has been lying to you. Comment your answer below, or be and tell me why. I read every single response. And if you found yourself hooked by this story, subscribe to the channel. It's the only way we'll keep bringing you stories that matter, stories that hit where it hurts and where it heals. There's a certain kind of silence that falls over a marriage when something essential begins to rot beneath the surface. Not the silence after a fight, not the stillness of a sleepy morning, no, this is different. It's the quiet that comes when two people share a space, but no longer share a truth. Violet Thompson began to feel that silence the night she returned home, a manila folder still warm from the attorney's office tucked beneath her coat. She had just inherited $2.7 million from her grandmother Clara. Money Clara had quietly built through antiques and long-term investments, money meant to ensure Violet's freedom. But when Violet reached the door of her small apartment, the world as she knew it cracked open. She paused. Her key was halfway in the lock when she heard the voices inside. Her husband Ryan and his sister Abigail, the cold, polished corporate lawyer who had never bothered to hide her disdain for Violet. Violet stayed still, barely breathing. What she heard next unraveled 5 years of marriage in less than 5 minutes. $2.7 million. Ryan, that's life-changing, Abigail was saying, her tone sharp, urgent. You need to act fast before Violet gets any ideas. I know, Ryan replied, quieter. But she's my wife. Violet's breath caught. You don't have a prenup, right? Abigail pressed. Half is legally yours. But why settle for half? Get her to open a joint account. Transfer the money. I'll draft the papers to make it airtight. Violet felt her knees weaken. Her body went cold. She hadn't told anyone about the inheritance, not yet. She had planned to surprise Ryan over dinner, share it with him the way you share good news with someone you love. But he already knew somehow. He knew. What then? Ryan asked after a pause. Then you leave, Abigail answered. Find someone younger, prettier. Start over, that studio you keep talking about. This is your chance. What followed was worse. Ryan didn't argue. He didn't defend Violet. He didn't walk away from the plan. You're right, he said slowly. I've played the good husband long enough. With that money, I can finally have the life I want. And just like that, the version of Ryan Violet had known, the man who made her hazelnut coffee in the mornings, who rubbed her shoulders while she graded papers, who held her hand at her grandmother's funeral, was gone, or maybe he had never really existed. She didn't confront him, not yet. Instinct told her not to. She slipped away, her mind racing, her pulse hammering in her ears. She called Rachel, her best friend since high school, the one person she could trust with something this dark, this dangerous. Rachel didn't hesitate. You're not going back there tonight, she said. He's dangerous, VI. But Violet knew she had to be careful. Ryan was cunning, and if he realized she knew the truth, he might move faster. She needed time to protect herself. The next morning, she returned home as if nothing had happened. Ryan greeted her with warmth, his voice thick with false concern. Missed you last night, he said, handing her a mug of coffee. She smiled, masking the revulsion that crept up her spine. Just girl talk, she said. It got late. That afternoon, Violet made an appointment with a family law attorney. Vincent Gregory was calm, methodical, and most importantly unshakably ethical. After hearing her story, he reassured her. Legally, he said, this inheritance is yours alone. It's not marital property unless you voluntarily commingle it. He can't touch it unless you give him access. Violet exhaled, a fraction of the weight lifting off her chest, but Vincent wasn't done. Be cautious, he warned. Change your passwords. Email, banking, everything. If he's desperate, he may try to access your accounts without your consent. She followed his advice, updating everything, scanning her devices for threats. What she didn't know then was that Ryan had already anticipated this. Months before, when they were still saving for a home and having long talks about their future, he had quietly installed spyware on her laptop. Violet had never suspected a thing. For now, she thought she was one step ahead. Ryan's behavior shifted in subtle but chilling ways. He morphed into the doting husband, almost to perfect. He made breakfast, folded laundry, asked her about her day. But beneath the domestic charm, his questions always circled back to the money. Have you met with a financial advisor yet? Are you thinking about a new place, maybe something bigger? We should probably set up a joint account soon, right? It'll make things easier. Violet responded vaguely, keeping her voice light, never letting him see the fear behind her eyes. But every word from him felt like a test, like bait. Then came the night she realized she needed a safe place to run if things turned worse. She quietly contacted a realtor and rented a modest one-bedroom apartment across town near the university. She moved some clothes, a few books, and Clara's keepsake box. She didn't tell Ryan, she shared the address only with Rachel and Vincent. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and Ryan, ever the strategist, found the lease agreement in an email she forgot to delete. One morning, he cornered her in the kitchen. "Why are you renting an apartment, Violet?" She froze. He kept his voice calm, but there was something cold in it, something calculated. "It's just a backup," she said, stirring her tea, avoiding his eyes. "The college might need me for evening classes. It's closer to campus." He didn't buy it, a whole apartment for evening classes. He said, stepping closer, "Come on, Violet, what's going on?" She tried another lie. "It's temporary. A colleague helped me get a good deal. I thought we could use it as a getaway spot." But Ryan was done pretending. "You're seeing someone?" He snapped. "Is that it? Or is it the money? You're keeping it all for yourself." She shook her head. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" His voice rose. "You're lying to me. Why?" Violet cornered, her back against the counter. She finally broke. "Because I don't feel safe," she said quietly. "Not with you." Ryan went still. "What are you talking about?" He asked, feigning hurt. "I'm your husband. I'm the one person who's always protected you." "No," she said, voice shaking but clear. "You planned to rob me, you and Abigail. I heard everything. Don't you dare talk about protection." He tried to recover, claimed Abigail had been talking nonsense, that he shut her down, that he loved Violet, that everything was a misunderstanding. But Violet wasn't buying it anymore. "You used to roll your eyes when I took care of Clara," she said. "You called her a burden. But now that she left me millions, you call her inspiring." He tried again, soft words, apologies, please, but she stood still, unmoved. Her silence rattled him more than her accusations. Finally, he snapped. "Then what do you want, Violet? What now?" Her answer was quiet, firm. "I don't know yet. But I think our paths are going to go separate ways." He tried to stop her, reach for her hand, but she stepped away, grabbed her coat, and left. Violet walked out into the night, her breath sharp in her chest. She didn't have all the answers, but she had something she hadn't had in weeks. Clarity and the will to fight. There's a peculiar kind of devastation that follows betrayal, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, precise, and surgical. It strips you slowly, thought by thought. Violet Thompson woke up to that kind of devastation the morning she logged into her bank account and found that the $2.7 million inheritance her grandmother had left her was gone. Not reduced, not frozen, gone, all but $3,214.87. She stared at the screen, willing the number to change. Her breath lodged somewhere between disbelief and dread. Then she clicked through the transaction history and saw it a transfer she hadn't authorized, moving nearly every cent into an unrecognizable account tied to a foreign bank. No name, just a string of numbers. For a moment, she sat paralyzed. This wasn't just theft. It was a violation so intimate it felt physical. Ryan had done it. Somehow, he had accessed her accounts. Despite the precautions she had taken, the changed passwords, the new devices he had still gotten in. And as the realization set in, so did the pain. Not only had the man she married plotted against her, he had executed it flawlessly. It was a betrayal not just of trust, but of safety, of history, of everything they had ever shared. She called the bank in a daze, reaching a manager named Karen. The woman's voice was calm but matter-of-fact. The transaction had been authorized from Violet's device. Correct login, correct password, two-factor authentication. It looked legitimate from our end, Karen said, her tone tinged with apology. "We suspect spyware or a keylogger, likely installed before you changed your credentials. Spyware, it hit her like a second blow. That meant Ryan had been preparing for this long before she confronted him. While pretending to be her husband, loving, present, supportive, he had quietly been collecting her keystrokes, watching her every financial move like a predator waits in the grass. He had stolen the very future Clara had tried to secure for her. Violet crumpled to the floor, the phone still in her hand, her chest heaving with the kind of sobs that come only when the bottom completely falls out of your world. It wasn't just the money, it was what the money represented, her grandmother's sacrifice, her love, her vision for Violet's freedom. And now it was gone, in the hands of a man she once trusted with her whole heart. Rachel arrived within the hour, breathless, eyes wide with fury. Violet told her everything, showed her the transaction records, the anonymous note Ryan had slipped into her mailbox the night before. Just 8 words in his unmistakable handwriting. If you only listened, we could have worked this out. Arrogant, cruel, final. We're going to the police, Rachel said, gripping Violet's hand like a lifeline. And they did. They filed a report, spoke with detectives. But the response was predictably cautious. Offshore accounts are difficult to trace, one officer said. We'll do what we can, but don't hold your breath. Violet returned to her apartment feeling stripped and hollow. She hadn't even opened Clara's belongings since the funeral, her grief to raw. But now, in desperation, she turned to them like someone searching for a last clue in a locked room. There, inside Clara's worn keepsake box, tucked into the lining where only the most meticulous eyes would find it, was a small envelope labeled in familiar script, for Violet. For a rainy day, her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a key and a short note. Dear Violet, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're in trouble. I always feared great fortune might bring great risk. I've hidden $500,000 in safe deposit box for 157 at First National Bank on Main Street. Use it wisely. Money isn't everything. Love and trust. Clara. Violet couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her tears came slowly this time, not from grief or rage, but from something deeper Clara had known. She had anticipated not just that wealth might bring problems, but that Violet might need a lifeline her heart hadn't yet imagined. She had left her granddaughter not just money, but a second chance. That same afternoon, Violet walked into the sterile vault room at First National Bank, her palms slick with sweat. The box opened with a soft click. Inside were neatly stacked hundreds and bearer bonds, not millions, but enough. Enough to start over, enough to think clearly. Enough to fight back. She met Rachel later that night in her apartment, now scrubbered of spyware thanks to a tech friend from Rachel's job. Over takeout and cheap wine, Violet explained everything. Your grandma was a genius, Rachel said, eyes wide with admiration. This ... this changes everything. It did, but Violet didn't see it as a victory. She saw it as grace, quiet, humble grace from a woman who had always looked 3 steps ahead. Clara hadn't just left money, she had left wisdom, caution, protection. She had anticipated that the world might one day try to take everything from Violet, and she had made sure it wouldn't succeed. Violet moved quickly. She set up a new bank account, this time under a completely different identity at a smaller institution that required in-person verification for every transaction. She hired Vincent to begin quietly exploring civil charges against Ryan. She asked Rachel's tech friend to check her devices again, every laptop, every phone, every digital trail. And most of all, she resolved not to allow this new gift to make her reckless again. No more blind trust, no more shared passwords. No more ignoring red flags just because someone says, I love you. She used part of the $500,000 to secure a modest condo in a quiet, safe neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just hers. She created a budget, hired a financial advisor, and made conservative, long-term plans. No revenge spending, no flashy declarations. Just steady rebuilding. But even as she moved forward, Violet stayed quiet. She knew Ryan, knew his charm, his unpredictability, his desperation. She suspected he hadn't gone far and that somewhere, somehow, he was still watching. But Clara had taught her well, love, when real, is a shield. And wisdom, When earned, Isama Ryan had taken her fortune. But Clara had given her the one thing more powerful than money, a second chance. There comes a point in every broken relationship when love is no longer a shield, and silence becomes your sharpest weapon. For Violet Thompson, that moment came on a grey Thursday afternoon when her phone buzzed with a call from Detective Harris. His voice was calm, but carried an urgency she hadn't heard before. "We've got a break," he said. "Your ex-husband didn't get far. He's still in the city." It turned out that Ryan's perfect crime had cracked under the weight of its own ambition. The final transfer of Violet's stolen inheritance intended for an offshore account had failed. His accomplice, a bank teller named Derek, had made an error that flagged the transfer. The funds were frozen before they could disappear beyond reach. The money was still there, tangled in red tape, but traceable. And Ryan, he was still here, hiding in plain sight. Which meant he was running out of time, and desperate men make dangerous decisions. That night, as the city blurred past her cab window, Violet couldn't quiet the voices in her head. Was this it? Would she finally get justice? Or would Ryan twist things again, spin another lie that left her the one gasping for clarity? She had seen what he was capable of when he thought he was losing control. At 3:08 a.m., her phone lit up. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But some part of her needed to know. "Hello," she said, her voice low. "It's me," Ryan replied. The sound of his voice sent a current through her body, part fear, part disbelief. He didn't sound like the confident man she remembered. He sounded tired, frayed, almost frantic. "We need to talk," he said. "There's nothing left to talk about," Violet answered coldly. "You stole everything. I didn't have a choice," Ryan insisted. "It's not what you think. I owe people, Violet, dangerous people. They found out about your inheritance. They forced me to take it." She didn't say anything. She let the silence stretch, let him fill it with more excuses. "They know where you live. This is bigger than you realize. If I don't pay them back, they'll come after both of us. Please, just meet me tomorrow, noon, at the old mill park, the gazebo by the pond, no cops." She hung up without another word and immediately called Detective Harris. When she repeated Ryan's story, he didn't flinch. "Classic deflection," he said. "He's playing scared to bait your sympathy. We'll set up a sting. Just get him talking long enough for us to move in." And so, it was set. Violet didn't sleep that night. Her thoughts swirled with fear and fury and something even heavier resolve. She would see this through. The next day, she arrived early. The old mill park was almost deserted, the late morning sun struggling to break through a sky the color of steel. She walked the gravel path slowly, her boots crunching beneath her. The gazebo stood just ahead, weathered and worn, framed by weeping willows and memories she hadn't yet made peace with. Rachel had promised to watch from a nearby bench, far enough not to be seen, but close enough to call for help if something went wrong. Violet's phone buzzed once, a text. "I'm here, you've got this." She stepped into the gazebo and waited, the weight of everything she'd endured pressing down on her shoulders. The betrayal, the lies, the loss, but beneath it all was a core of strength she hadn't known she possessed. At noon, Ryan appeared. He looked nothing like the man she had married. His suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He trudged toward her like someone who had aged a decade in a week. "Thanks for coming," he said, sitting across from her, his eyes darting to the trees. "You said you needed to talk," Violet replied, her voice even. "I'm in over my head," he began. "I know I messed up, but I never meant for it to go this far. The people they don't care about explanations. They want their money." "So, you stole from me," she said, "to save yourself." "I was trying to save us both," he said quickly. "But the transfer failed. I lost access to the account. They're getting impatient. Violet, if you just tell the police you authorized it, I can get the money, pay them off, and disappear. You won't have to see me again." She tilted her head, studying him. "You want me to lie again, so you can clean up your mess?" His face twitched. "It's not lying, it's survival." He reached into his coat, and for a split second, Violet's breath caught. She imagined a gun, a flash of violence. But instead, he pulled out a folder. "Legal papers, it seemed. I had these drafted," he said, a power of attorney form. If you sign, we can make the money move without raising alarms. They'll be off our backs. But before she could answer, the bushes erupted. Officers in plain clothes swarmed the gazebo. One of them tackled Ryan to the ground as others retrieved the folder. Shouts filled the air. The moment ended as quickly as it had begun. Ryan Carter, you're under arrest for grand theft, conspiracy, and fraud, one officer barked. Violet stood frozen as they dragged him away, his shouts turning to pleas. Violet, tell them you came here to help me. But she didn't move. Detective Harris approached her with a grim expression and the manila folder in hand. Forged documents, he said. He was going to try to make the transfer look legitimate. Classic manipulation, and the story about dangerous people. Total fiction. We've already run his financials. No debt, no threats, just greed, she nodded slowly. Not in shock, no, that had passed long ago, but in confirmation. He was exactly who she thought he was. In the days that followed, more details surfaced. Ryan's accomplice, Derek the bank teller, had helped bypass security using stolen credentials. Abigail, Ryan's sister, had drafted the fraudulent legal framework. She had even whispered to Ryan what to say, how to act, how to win Violet back just long enough to get what he needed. It had all been a performance, rehearsed down to the last tier, but it had failed. The money, frozen in that US account, was being returned to Violet, every cent. Ryan had gambled and lost. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Violet didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a woman who had walked through fire and come out clearer, sharper, unburned where it counted most. Justice, some say, moved slowly, but that day in the gazebo, it moved exactly when it needed to. And for Violet Thompson, it was the day the ground stopped shaking beneath her feet. Grief can bruise you, but betrayal carves you open. Healing, then, is less about erasing the pain and more about rebuilding yourself around the scar. That was the truth Violet Thompson learned in the year following Ryan's arrest. The courtroom had been cold and sterile, filled with the scraping of chairs and the murmurs of legal formality, but for Violet, it marked something deeply personal the moment she let go of the last remnants of what she thought her marriage had been. Ryan was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His accomplice, Derek, the bank teller who had helped facilitate the theft, received 5. Abigail, Ryan's sister, was disbarred and handed a 2-year suspended sentence for her role in orchestrating the legal cover for the scheme. Violet watched them all from her seat in the courtroom gallery, her hands folded tightly in her lap. There was no vindictive triumph in her expression, only a quiet, exhausted acceptance. Justice had been served, but it didn't come with celebration. It came with silence. The months after the trial were quieter than she expected. Violet had gotten the money back, every cent of the $2.7 million that Clara had left her. But more than that, she had gotten her agency back, her sense of direction. She moved into a small but light-filled condo in a quiet Cincinnati suburb, nothing extravagant, just enough to breathe again. The walls were bare at first, echoing with memories she hadn't yet decided what to do with. But over time, she filled them with framed prints of her favorite impressionist works, shelves of novels she used to love before life got too loud, and photos of Clara that made the space feel like home. What no one told her was that money, when regained, doesn't fix what was broken, it just gives you space to mend. Violet started therapy 6 months after Ryan's conviction. Rachel insisted, gently but persistently, especially after Violet began having dreams where Ryan would show up at her door, smiling, asking her to come home. In those dreams, she never said no. That scared her more than she let on. Her therapist, Dr. Ellis, was calm and patient, the kind of woman who asked one question and let the silence do the rest. Trust isn't about forgetting what happened, she told Violet one afternoon. It's about learning to believe in your own judgment again. Violet nodded, not fully understanding, but committed to trying. She began journaling small things, daily reflections. A moment of peace during a morning walk, a kind comment from a student. The act of writing reminded her she was still here, still learning how to live without flinching. In late spring, she was invited to speak at a pedagogy conference in Columbus. It had been years since she presented at anything outside of her local community college. Clara would have been proud, Violet thought as she packed her notes, carefully folding them into her leather tote next to a battered copy of The Wasteland. She hadn't read it in a while, but something about the title felt appropriate. During a coffee break at the conference, she met Ethan Harper, a literature professor from a nearby university. His wire-rimmed glasses and quiet smile didn't make an immediate impression, but his conversation did. They talked about modernist poetry, student engagement, and the underrated brilliance of Flannery O'Connor. He didn't dominate the discussion, he asked questions, he listened. They exchanged emails, nothing flirtatious, just the kind of intellectual curiosity that reminded Violet how good it felt to be seen for something other than what she had survived. Over the next few weeks, those emails turned into regular correspondence, then coffee, then dinner, always slow, always respectful. When she finally told Ethan about what had happened about Ryan, the inheritance, the manipulation, he didn't recoil or pepper her with questions. He listened, nodded, and simply said, "I'm sorry that someone you trusted used love as leverage." It was the first time she didn't feel the need to explain or defend herself. Ethan never made grand promises. He didn't speak in sweeping declarations of love or try to convince her he was different. He just showed up, consistently, thoughtfully. When she had a tough week at work, he'd drop off her favorite tea with a note tucked under the box, for when the world feels heavy. When she spoke about Clara, he didn't change the subject or offer platitudes. He asked for stories. Wanted to know the woman who raised her, wanted to know what Violet had inherited besides the money. One evening, as they walked through the local arboretum, she brought it up, the inheritance. She had never told a man about it since Ryan, but something in her trusted Ethan. She watched him closely after the words left her mouth, searching for a flicker of greed, a change in tone. Instead, he just frowned and said, "That's a lot to carry. I'd probably lose sleep worrying about how to use it wisely." And that was it, no follow-up questions. No subtle probing, just empathy. Rachel, of course, had opinions. "He's a keeper," she declared over a bottle of wine in Violet's living room, not a red flag in sight. Violet laughed, a sound that still surprised her some days. "I'm still watching." "Good," Rachel said, "keep him honest." But honesty wasn't something Violet had to ask for with Ethan, it was who he was. Their relationship didn't erase the past, it didn't try to. Instead, it made space for the scar tissue, let it breathe, let it matter. A year after Ryan's sentencing, Violet stood in a sun-dappled garden wearing a simple white dress. The wedding was small, just Rachel, a few close friends, and Ethan's parents sitting beneath the magnolia trees. There was no grand reception, no towering cake or glittering decor. Just wildflowers on wooden tables and a string quartet playing softly in the background. When she looked into Ethan's eyes and said her vows, she didn't promise forever. She promised presence, honesty, patience, and he did the same. As they cut a small vanilla cake, Rachel raised a glass and toasted with a grin, to Violet who kicked a thief to the curb and found a guy who doesn't suck. Laughter rippled through the garden. Violet caught Ethan's amused glance and smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was true. Later that evening, as they sat on a bench beneath the magnolia tree, Ethan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and asked, "Happy?" She turned to him, eyes soft, voice certain, "More than I thought possible." Because she knew now that wealth could be stolen. That love, when twisted, could become a weapon. But trust, real trust, was something you earned, moment by moment. Violet didn't know what the future held, but she knew who she was now. She knew what Clara had really left her, not just money, wisdom, strength, and the courage to begin again. Sometimes, life doesn't fall apart in a moment, it unravels thread by thread, quietly, invisibly, until one day you wake up and realize the life you thought you were living was never really yours. Violet Thompson's story isn't just about betrayal, it's about rediscovery. It's about finding the strength to rebuild when everything stable, everything sacred, has been ripped away. What happened to Violet could happen to anyone. You trust someone. You believe in the love you've built together. You share your future, your dreams, your vulnerabilities. But sometimes, The person lying next to you at night is not dreaming with you, they're calculating, watching, waiting for the moment when your success, your joy, your security becomes something they feel entitled to take. But Violet's strength didn't come from rage, it didn't come from revenge. It came from quiet, consistent courage. She didn't fight back by screaming, she fought back by preparing. She sought help, protected herself legally and emotionally, and, above all, she listened to the wisdom her grandmother left behind, not just in money, but in values. The most profound part of this story is not that Violet reclaimed her fortune. It's that she reclaimed herself. She learned that love without respect is manipulation, that presence without loyalty is a performance, and that starting over isn't weakness, it's the most powerful decision you can make when someone tries to steal your worth. Too often, we equate resilience with toughness, but real resilience is soft in nature. It allows you to feel, to break down, to cry at 3 a.m. in your empty apartment, and then get up the next day and take one more step toward healing. Violet's journey shows us that it's not the fall that defines us, but the way we choose to rise. She didn't chase closure, she didn't demand an apology. She built a new life on her own terms, and when someone came along who truly saw her, not her scars, not her story, not her inheritance, she allowed herself to trust again, slowly, deliberately, bravely. So what's the lesson here? The greatest wealth in life is not measured in dollars. It's measured in trust, in integrity, in the people who stand by you, not because of what you have, but because of who you are. And when betrayal finds you, and at some point in life it will, don't let it define you, let it reveal you. Let it show you the parts of yourself you forgot were there, your boundaries, your brilliance, your bravery. How can you apply this to your own life? First, protect yourself emotionally and financially, even in love. Trust is beautiful, but it should never be blind. Have your own account. Know your passwords. Keep part of your independence, even in the happiest relationships. Second, listen to your gut. Violet didn't want to believe Ryan could betray her, but her instincts told her something was wrong. If your body tightens when you hear someone speak, if your sleep becomes restless around them, don't ignore that. And finally, if you've been through betrayal, don't rush to move on. Heal with intention, learn from the pain, not in spite of it, but through it. And when you're ready, when you're truly ready, love again, but love with wisdom this time. Let me ask you something, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is more difficult to rebuild after betrayal? A trust in other people, be trust in yourself. Let us know by commenting or and share a little bit of your reasoning if you feel comfortable. Your perspective might help someone else feel less alone. If this story touched you, if it gave you something to think about or made you feel seen, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. It helps more than you know, and if you feel generous, if you believe in the power of stories to heal and guide, please consider donating to support this work. I'm no longer young, but I'm still here, still sharing, because I believe good stories can change lives. Even the smallest donation can help keep these stories coming for you, for others, for the next person who needs it most. Thank you for watching, for reading, and for being part of this space. Your support is not just appreciated, it's the reason I keep going.